Pilgrim's Progress comes out in 1678, in the middle of the restoration of the monarchy. And nowadays we're used to novels coming out from season to season, year to year, month to month. There's a lot of fiction. There's something like 5,000 new novels coming out every year in England, and there were nothing like that number in the late 17th century. And Bunyan stands alone for a long time, and so 50 years passes until 1719, by which time we're into the beginning of the Georgian period, and the world has changed. We have newspapers, we have journalists, we have the press, we have the rise of the reading public, and we have the beginnings of the freelance writer in the shape of Daniel Defoe, whose real name was Daniel Foe. He added "de" because he thought it made it sound more significant. So he's Daniel Foe, he's Daniel Defoe, and he is an inveterate scribbler. As he said of himself, he was dipped in ink. He, in some ways, from many points of view, is the first novelist, because he's telling a story, he's telling it for money. John Bunyan wasn't writing for money, he was writing out of a deep need to express himself. But Daniel Defoe is writing because he's broke. He's already been in the pillory for all kinds of trouble. And he's like Bunyan also in the sense he's writing out of a sense of extremes. But he has got a great insight, which is he has decided to mix fact and fiction. He says the novel or fiction lies like truth, which is a great insight. So it has to be grounded in verisimilitude, has to be rooted in reality. And yet, of course, it's a made-up story. And so his story, the story of Robinson Crusoe, which he presents to the audience as by Crusoe, not by Defoe. He says he's simply the editor. Robinson Crusoe on the title page says it's edited by Daniel Defoe, and it's he purports to tell a story about somebody who had the Robinson Crusoe experiences, and of course it's a first-person story, so he is impersonating Robinson Crusoe, and he is mixing fact and fiction from the beginning, and he's basing the story of Robinson Crusoe on indeed on the memoirs of a guy called Alexander Selkirk, who had been stranded on an island in the Atlantic. And it was a fairly well-known story, and he was taking this story and he was selling it to the reading public for the first time in the story of Robinson Crusoe. Again, like Bunyan, who comes before him, he has no way to kind of orientate himself. He's making it up as he goes along. First of all, from the very beginning of the book, there's a fantastic narrative voice. It's unhurried, it's unflustered, it's slightly journalistic. He gets into your inner ear as a reader, and he's very seductive. And he's just telling you a story. It's very low key. There are no effects apparently on the page, and it's a smooth narration. But it's a terrible story of a man who leaves home and has a kind of series of ever more disastrous journeys. And he describes it's partly a journey. The book is again narrates the experience of a young man who's coming to terms with himself, and he goes on these journeys. He gets shipwrecked several times, in fact, in the first 30 pages, and then finally he has the big shipwreck, which everyone remembers, and lands on this island and has to rebuild his life. Shipwrecks, interestingly, are a very popular theme. Shakespeare has the shipwreck at the beginning of The Tempest, and of course at the beginning of Twelfth Night there's a shipwreck. Readers in this country are surrounded by water, and the sea and the shipping is very much central to our way of life. So the shipwreck is a very good starting point. And Defoe has Crusoe, Robinson Crusoe, a name derived from a Dutch name. I think he says it's a corruption of a Dutch name, on the island, and he has to remake his entire world. It's unflustered, it's simple, it's quite low key. He's just telling you a story, and it's very compelling. And so the book has a wonderful tone. So when the shipwreck occurs, when Crusoe's shipwreck occurs, and he's on the island, and he describes how he has to get his provisions from the wreck and build his house and so forth. It's very sort of non-fiction. It's documentary, and it's very specific about the things he gets in the boat and the way he brings it ashore and how he rebuilds his world, which is a device used by many contemporary writers when they're writing fiction today. The other thing about him is he's got a tremendous eye for the visual. The way in which you animate a story as a novelist, obviously it's partly by writing, but it's also by planting very strong visual images in the narrative. So, for example, he has his parrot, and everyone remembers Crusoe's parrot. And then, of course, there is this sensational, absolutely sensational moment when he's working on the island and he sees this footprint. And it is the most brilliant, it's a cinematic device almost. So here's this footprint. Who does it belong to? Where's it come from? What's going on? And then, of course, he introduces Man Friday. And then off we go when we now have a relationship between the solitary Crusoe and his sidekick, Man Friday. And that is the thing which drives the novel right or the story for many hundreds or many scores of pages thereafter.